We're going to move on to Scott Tipping, to our part of our international audience here. He's from Golden Horseshoe in Hamilton, Ontario, and he's going to share with us their path to hybrid meetings.
Oh, that beautiful picture. Beautiful picture.
Can you make it full? There we go.
Yeah, this is right outside my back door. No, I'm kidding. Good evening, folks. I'm Scott Tipping. I am the communications website officer for the Golden Horseshoe Woodturners Guild. We're located in Ontario, Canada, around the Niagara, Hamilton, Toronto area. We have about 120 members in our guild, and this presentation is going to be a little bit different than the others. We're not experts telling you the best products to use or how you should set things up. This presentation is about our journey and the process that we have followed to start working our way into the hybrid meetings. So if you haven't figured out how to deliver hybrid meetings yet, then this may help provide you with a little focus, or at least to learn what we did and what we could have done better. In the interest of time, I'm going to be reading my script so that I can blast through it as quickly as possible, but if you need to stop me, then please feel free. I'm going to break our presentation down into, we got a second slide here. There we are. Into 4 brief sections, forming our team, the goals for hybrid meetings and some basic principles that we followed, identifying our technology needs, and the analysis that led to our recommended plan. As many of you did, we spent 2 years during COVID meeting via Zoom. We had a couple of paid IRDs. We did our own demos and videos, and it worked fine. During that time, however, our host location changed. And when we polled our members about moving sites, we also polled them about offering hybrid meetings. And at the time, we asked our members if the guild were to develop the ability to live stream meetings from the new location or provide the video recordings of the meetings and then make them available via YouTube, would you see that as an alternative to in-person meetings? And while generally everybody agreed they wanted to meet face-to-face, about 3/4 of the respondents said that they supported the hybrid meetings. Plus, our old analog technology is grossly outdated and starting to be problematic. So at a minimum, we need to update it and hopefully improve that in-person experience. So back in April, we held our first in-person, when we held our first in-person meeting, we advised the members that we were looking into the hybrid meetings and then invited volunteers to serve on the committee. The committee was struck, which now includes me, Mike McLeod, Mike Brazo, John McCauley, and Maurice Solar, to develop a plan to bring our hybrid meetings to the Guild. I believe a couple of the guys are with us tonight. I saw John here, and our club president, Keith Robinson, is also here as well. At our meeting, before we even discussed what was needed, one of the members had said that they had already figured out a solution and wanted to show us what they had. And a demo ensued, and it really didn't check off all the marks. Some of the components were good, weren't fully integrated. The solution was designed more for a Probus style meeting and not a wood turning demo. And we decided that rather than take someone else's idea and adapt it, that it was important to start with a needs assessment before looking to the solution. And we also identified that it was important for the entire team to go through the whole process, the learning process from the beginning to the end, so that all team members would be on the same page at the same time. We'd understand what we decided upon and why. We'd be comfortable taking on any role in a meeting if required. And so we regrouped and started over from scratch. And at the same time, of course, we've been attending these meetings and continue to learn from others. So what were our goals and principles? The first meeting, we agreed to some basic principles. Affordable, but not cheap. Keep it simple. We wanted to walk before we could run. A phased approach, if we needed to, was okay. And that the technology had to be adaptable. So some of the key outcomes or goals or deliverables that we established were that the meeting experience should be very similar for everyone, whether you're with us in the room or at home. That step-by-step documentation of the system layout was necessary, and that it had to be dummy-proof so that guys like me can follow it. And that this was not going to be a one-person show. We acknowledged that there needed to be a team of committed individuals available to help, both on a regular basis as well as on a backup basis if needed. We needed sufficient money and we needed sufficient time to allow to do the research, to do the testing. We wanted our decisions to be educated, vetted, and then hopefully only make them once. We're also realistic though, and recognize that, you know, we may have to make adjustments and tweak as required once we get into the implementation stage. The system we implement had to improve upon the existing audio and video experience, because we've been using the same system for the last 10 years. And it was really important for us to acknowledge that that was an important piece of the puzzle. And the other really interesting piece to this, I thought, was that our meeting recordings had to be made available for reference, our reference library, so that others can continue to learn from our meeting presentations. And we see this as sort of a third spoke to the wheel. The hybrid meetings being the in-persons, folks can appreciate the demonstration. The folks at home viewing in the moment can appreciate the demonstration. And the third spoke to that is that anyone can view it later online for continued learning.
Totally in agreement with that.
So what was the process that we followed, and what are we going to implement? After we regrouped, we first identified what a hybrid meeting meant to us. That was important to do because we were all over the place and on different pages. And so we whiteboarded and brainstormed to identify all the various components that may be needed for us to provide a fully hybrid meeting. By the end of the meeting, we had created component clusters that we asked one or two team members to dig into a little bit more, to research, to consider what may or may not work for us, and then to present back to the team what their recommendations were for us to consider. Now, to be quite frank, this is a very simplified breakdown, but the level of detail was a tad overwhelming because there is a lot to consider. We broke it down basically as follows. Video. This was looking at the cameras that we were going to use. Are they going to be camcorders, webcams, GoPros, cell phones? How many do we need? Where would they be used? Do we want the zoom in functionality or not? What are the cabling needs? But not only that, how are they going to be mounted? Are they on tripods, overhead, towers, booms? What about our lighting? There was obviously lots to consider in this category. And then closely related is the projection of those video images, TV versus projectors. What are the lumens on each? How many do we need? A big TV for the audience, but what about the monitors for the producer or the Zoom host? What about a monitor for the presenter that Alan was talking about earlier, so that they can see what the audience is seeing? If we do a big TV, 65 or 75 inches, how the heck are we going to lift it high enough that the audience is going to be able to see it? What is it going to be mounted on? And then if it's mounted on something, how do we move it? How do we store it? What are the weight requirements? If we're doing multiple cameras, then how do we feed and organize and switch between the video presentations? And what the heck is this ATEM mini that everyone keeps talking about? So again, there was lots to consider. Same for audio, microphones, speakers, sound mixer. What is the need? How's it all going to be integrated together? Can we leverage the church's existing system? We have a membership of about 120 people, and certainly not all attend, but our room is probably a good 35 by 55 feet in dimensions. So we've got a big size room. And then finally, on the computer side, is a laptop good enough? Do we need the portability, or should we build a computer that allows us the capacity to upgrade our components over time, add ports, etc.? What is our Zoom account? Is it sufficient to do what we want to do? Are we recording the Zoom meetings locally or to the cloud? How do they render, and do they render to the quality necessary? We decided we wanted to do it locally to get a better quality production. Is our YouTube account sufficient? What about cables, adjusters, adapters, splitters, all these things? Again, tons and tons and tons to consider. So
let me break in a second, say about recording, because you and I talked about that, and I advised local recording, but I've since learned better. I'm now using cloud recording, and because I'm on a 1080p license through the Zenrite Consortium, I get a very good recording at the other end, which was a big surprise to me.
That's a good point. And without that higher licensing, the local rendering is the best quality. So if you're prepared to pay the money for that, then absolutely it's worth it. But we knew we were going to be spending a fair coin on all the other things, and we wanted to temper that just a titch. So because of the volume, because of being overwhelmed, to help us focus our thinking a little bit, we kind of mocked up a proposed room layout. And I know you probably can't see this to any great degree, but this was helpful when talking conceptually, because now everyone was not visualizing the space differently. We were looking at, where are we going to stand? How are we going to mount this item versus that item? Where are we going to position show and tell, or the President's Challenge part of our meetings? How are the cables going to be laid? Do we have long enough extension cords to reach and power the heavy lathe? And we've also done some other graphic images as well about our lathe and the camera positions and stuff. And I think once we did this, it helped to solidify some of our thinking. But it's basic. Lathe, the lathe is on the left-hand side of this image. Producer computers to the right side of the lathe, the big TV to the left, and so on. In the interest of time, and considering that we really technically haven't presented to our executive yet, I'm not going to get into our recommendations about what we're going to buy and so on. Frankly, so much of that is going to be unique to each of the different clubs, your space, your research, your needs, your financial ability, and so on. I'm going to just steer clear. But basically, we pulled together our analysis into a chart like this. This is a very simple representation of the layout we used. And for each of the technology needs, we broke down into maybe half a dozen different subcategories, but like the splitters and the cables or the mounting hooks. But we looked at first at what we currently have, and if it worked, then we didn't need to go any further. And if it didn't, then we considered we could make up to 2 different recommendations for the committee to look at, maybe a scenario 1 and 2. We discussed the pros and cons of each of it. We listed where we could buy them from if that information had been identified, and then some high-low cost estimates. Now, having said that, when we do go to the membership, we will be inviting them to make donations of items if they're available and so on. And we're also going to consider where we can buy things in a more cost-effective way. So when researching, we obviously attended the open forum meetings to learn more, but we also watched the myriad of videos produced or posted by John. Thank you very much. We consulted with experts in the field. We went to Henry's for our video equipment, other computer stores. We went to Long and McQuaid for audio. We emailed our peers and some of the folks who attend these meetings. We even had a Zoom demo with Bert Delisle from the Edmonton Woodturners, who showed us his setup and the merits of the ATEM Mini Pro. And so just to give you perspective, this is the basic timeline that we followed. We had a little stumble at the beginning, as I mentioned, that slowed us down, but we didn't necessarily take our time. There's advantages to working as a committee, like being able to get the wisdom of the group and spreading out the workload and so on, but it can also take a little bit longer, especially when everyone has to be informed or decisions have to be made collectively. The nice thing is we knew that we had the summer off and we to work on this, and we hope to roll it out fall. Lessons learned, this is definitely a journey, and the level of detail and learning can be crippling and overwhelming. You can find yourself in a paralysis by analysis situation quite easily. So stay focused, do the research, have a plan, and then implement. For us, our next steps include going to the executive to approve our proposal, maybe strategize a little bit on how we might want to finance the project. That's on August 24th, so just next week. Then we have to poll our members because our bylaws require a 2/3 approval to spend more than $1,000. So we may also solicit them for donations. And if we get their go-ahead, we'll start buying our components, doing the testing at home, start the phase-in of our technology for our live meetings, and then maybe a little bit at a time, maybe all at once. We haven't really determined that yet. But most importantly, we'll take time to step back, reassess when it's all done, and then determine if it's working and if there's anything that we can do better. So finally, in summary, there is a lot to consider. There is a lot to learn, not just about the individual pieces, but more importantly, how they all work together. And frankly, I'm not sure that I'm confident with that yet. I confess that's true, but I like to think I know what I'm doing, but I don't. Decide up front what you're trying to achieve and what it's going to look like. Visualize the meeting, discuss what will happen under certain circumstances, listen and learn from others, and then search out the tools to make it happen. So thank you for your time. I'm sure my clock says I'm pretty darn close to the limit, but if you have any questions,
Thanks, Scott. We appreciate that a lot. And it's great to hear someone who's so process focused. It's a different perspective. Do we have questions for Scott? Just use the raise hand and
Or just jump.
or jump in, I guess, at this point.
I have to say, I'm very impressed by your planning process. It's the kind of thing you expect from well-educated Canadians. We don't get that kind of education here very easily.
I think people who work in processes do, but the one thing I didn't see in here, and the one thing, was our learning, is, there is the kind of, as Rick Baker talked about, for people working on it, you're going to need to have the people that committed to do this actually, and to work on this every month or whatever your meeting period is, and have enough people volunteer to keep up with that. And that was one of our learnings, is you can't do this with one or two people. You need a group that's willing to work on this all the time.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So let's move on.
Just make sure there's no more questions in the room. Are there any?
I didn't see any.
I didn't see any. Okay, we're good. Thanks.